Everyone, welcome to the show. Today we are joined by Fiona de Jong, an inspiring leader and strategic thinker who's making waves on the global sports stage. As a director of Australian Institute of Sports European Training Centre in Italy, of all places, sounds amazing, Fiona brings a decade of high performance experience, having guided 10 Australian Olympic teams through her 12 plus years of the Australian Olympic Committee and deepened Australia's global impact during her 5 years at Austrade. She also serves on Surfing Australia's board and advises on sports diplomacy at Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. If that wasn't enough, in today's episode, we'll explore how Fiona leverages international partnerships and elite performance environments to empower athletes, and what leaders across industries can learn about building resilience, cultivating alliances, and driving high impact results. Man, we've got a lot of ground to cover here, Fiona. Welcome. I'm so pleased to be talking to you.
That sounds like an Olympics of podcasts there, Phil.
It's a big one. We're going to cover some ground, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We are going to link to all of your respective backgrounds and all the things that you do. But I would just like to start with, how do you think this all came to pass, that you're in Italy helping to coordinate not just Olympic and sport high performance for now, but also well into the next era when we bring the Olympics back to Australia? How did you get here to have this kind of career that you have right now?
Oh, big question, Phil. I should start by saying, I consider myself immensely privileged to have assumed the roles that I have and been on the journey I have. But indeed, it's a really long way from the outskirts of Brisbane, where I grew up, to Lago Varese, which is where I am, between Milan and Lake Como at the moment. So let me indulge a little in the backstory, because I think, like you and every one of your listeners, we're all a product of the experiences and our background. So I'll start from where my career began. I think the seeds are usually sowed when you're pretty young. And for me, I grew up on the outskirts of Brisbane. I swam in the local Moggle Creek. I rode BMX bikes with my brother, and I ran across the hills, playing with my cousins, which at the time I didn't anticipate was a wonderful upbringing for a future career in the sport of triathlon. You swim, you ride, and you run. But I was raised in a family of two. I had a brother, and from the very beginning, I was instilled with a really hard work ethic from my dad, and raised to believe that we could do anything or be anyone if we were prepared to work hard enough. And I think as parents who didn't have the opportunity to finish school, they instilled in us the importance of hard work and getting a good education. And I was privileged to have that. I was also raised in a family where anything my brother could do, I could do. So from the get-go, being a girl, I never considered to be a barrier. And I know that not every woman in the world, now that I travel in the world internationally, is privileged to have that kind of an upbringing. So those foundations are pretty formative, I think, to who I am, and having grown up in Australia has been a big part of who I've become. I went to school. I had ambitions of going to university, if no one in my family had. I thought being a lawyer was a perfectly acceptable answer to a question of what you want to be when you grow up. I really didn't know. So I did study law and IT. I thought this internet thing might go somewhere. So everyone was doing arts law at the time, and I thought, no, I want to do something a bit different. So I studied law and IT at Bond Uni. I was fortunate to get a scholarship there, and it was there that I found the sport of triathlon. So I found myself doing a double degree whilst training for triathlons, and I'm one of those people that if you're going to do something, you do it well. So I wanted to graduate with honours from law, do my IT degree, and make the Australian triathlon team. And I think people who knew me at university would say I wasn't a particularly social girl. You didn't really find me at the Don's Tavern much on a Friday night, because I was really clear on the ambitions that I had. I wanted to be Sporty Spice and have a career. So when I graduated, I went to work at a law firm, Blake Dawson Wardren, they were then, and now Ashurst. And my early early time as a lawyer was really formative to the skills that have been important through my career. They teach you to write, to articulate an argument, to negotiate, navigate contracts, deal with difficult people, difficult problems. And I loved my time as a lawyer, but very quickly I figured out, I looked ahead at the partners of the firm and went, I don't really want to be you when I grow up. With all due respect to any lawyers in the audience, it's like, it's just a boring profession, like for me. So I kind of thought, well, I've invested so much, as my family had in doing that. It's not easy to step away from a career that you've invested in. And anyone who's ever transitioned from a career, it's a real leap of faith and almost feel like you're turning your back on all those people who supported you along the way. But I knew that it wasn't truly aligned with who I was. I wanted to do the deals rather than document them. I liked people more than paper. I like to be forward-looking, and a lot of law is pulling things apart from what's happened in the past. So fundamentally who I was not necessarily aligned with being the world's best lawyer. So I had my sporty spice over here where I was doing triathlons, and I had my professional spice over here, and I thought, look, I wonder if I could combine them. Are there real jobs in sport? So I spoke to a lot of people that worked in the sports sector and understood that the skills that I'd acquired as a lawyer could be applied. I volunteered at my local triathlon club just to see if I enjoyed helping out, yeah? And I loved it. Like, I loved applying my professional skills to a sector that I was passionate about. And I think that's the message for anyone who is ever looking at transitioning in career. It's you got to be really honest with yourself around what you love and then what your skills are and connect those dots. So I was fortunate.
When you think about people who, I guess, think about sport, we all consume sport. We love it. Australians probably more than anyone else.
Yes.
We have such a diversity of interest in sport. And I guess we just expect it to be on. We never think about everything that goes on, unless you've done sport at some level. You just expect there to be administrators. You expect it to run. You expect to turn up and play. You expect to have all these things work. And, from a very, young and formative age, you've gone and sought out what actually happens behind the scenes to make those triathlons work, which are no small feat back then, are certainly no small feat now. What was?
I think it was just curiosity. I mean,
yeah.
Like a lot of people, if you see the beauty that comes from sport, you want to kind of get under the covers of it.
Yeah.
And it's people like you that, that are coaches and volunteers. Much of sport is run on volunteers and people's passion and belief in the good that it brings to children's lives. Like you, as a soccer coach for the under 12s girls team, it's people like you that keep the universe of sport going, and that grassroots all the way up to the Olympics is based on a system of partnerships, which is why it's interesting to talk about it through the lens of the work that you do. It is. I was curious about how does the world of sport actually happen? And again, what's the contribution that I can make if I'm interested in it? Is there a real job? Yeah. So you just got to kind of understand the landscape, and I did my homework and spoke to a lot of people. And again, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it well. And the Olympics is obviously the pinnacle of the sports community in many circles. AFL dudes might not think that. And I was really fortunate that someone was willing to connect the dots on my experience and open the doors of opportunity to work at the Olympic movement. And that was the start of what was then 12 years with the Australian Olympic Committee, 9 of those as Director of Sport, so looking after how we get the athletes on the plane, a uniform on their back, take them to the Olympic Village, have them compete, put medals around their neck, bring them back. Sounds really simple, but a big complex project.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 as CEO of the Australian Olympic Committee, which was a wonderful thing to be part of.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I mean, you think about all of the different countries that we have attending Olympics.
205.
Right. And then you've got all of the people who are your role for their country.
Correct.
Trying to achieve exactly what you're trying to achieve. And they might have a much bigger team, a much smaller team, cultural differences, everything that comes across. Yet the one galvanizing factor here is the fact that we're here to compete. and we're here to enjoy the
Absolutely.
sport, right?
And that's the interesting thing. Like, everyone thinks we're fierce competitors as administrators of sport. You know, I work with my compatriots here at the French Institute and or the French Olympic Committee and the US Olympic Committee and the Japanese Olympic Committee. But there's a collegiality and there's a spirit of friendship that endures, and that there's an underlying spirit of competitiveness, yes, on the field of play.
Sure. Yep.
But off the field of play, it is this warm, collaborative environment that we're all deeply embedded in the belief that the world is a better place for sport. And our role is helping to make the world a better place through sport. So that belief in the higher purpose is what unites us in the work that we do and helps us to, work together. So a lot of people don't know, but even on the field of play, we will partner with other countries to help our athletes. I'm working on Milano Cortina at the moment, and we're obviously not big in winter sports as much as we are in the summer sports. So we work with Norwegian wax technicians to wax our skis, and then we'll have someone that's a performance analyst that'll stand on the course and clock the athlete as they go past. So we'll help the Norwegians will help us. So countries do collaborate and work together, even though we are competitors.
Yes.
And it's a message for people in other sectors and other industries where you think your greatest competitor might not be someone that you can partner with, but there is more that you can do together than what you can sometimes do individually.
Look, it's funny as well because this happens in many other contexts. As a former military soldier, the same things happen across allied countries, like the friendships and mateships you have by, forging relationships, doing things that are difficult together, visiting countries that you've never been to before. Those friendships last a lifetime. And quite ironically, the friendships start in a very compressed time. You don't have all of your childhood to make the friendship. You have a very short amount of time, and that overarching galvanizing force just brings that friendship to life. And it creates a memory, which I'm convinced is something which is quite marvelous about sport and serving and all the other things, but it's really something.
It is. And what you've just experienced in the military setting, which is you go in, you execute, and you leave. Yeah? Execute as an execute a plan. No.
Yep.
And the Olympic Games are actually very similar to that. You go in with your 400 teammates, you compete, and then you come back. So that idea of going in and being in the trenches together, and it's damn hard work in the Olympic Village during Olympic Games, because you're there to service and help every athlete give the best performance of their life. But you are shoulder to shoulder with people from other countries that are trying to do the same thing for their athletes. And the friendships that you build, both with the IOC and other countries, the allied countries, is very strong, even in the sports sector, where we say, can we use your cleaners? And like going to Rio was a classic where the village basically wasn't built when we moved in there. So the IOC didn't solve it. Rio Organising Committee didn't solve it. We were like, the planes were coming, the athletes were coming, and like the village still wasn't built. We're like, we're going to solve this ourselves. National Olympic Committees got together and said, okay, you bring the cleaners, we'll bring the plumbers, we'll bring the craftsmen, all used our embassies and said, let's solve this together. It was only through partnering and dividing and conquering together that we kind of got to the start line of Rio.
And meanwhile, we're sitting at home watching the opening ceremony thinking everything's just fine.
No one will ever know.
It's amazing. So when you think about all of your legal training, some of the study you would have done in information technology, I mean, there has been such an advancement made across the board in technology as it relates to sport. But what are some of the things you took from that very early training that you had, maybe even as a lawyer, that have stood you in great stead as you've moved into the sports commissions, then across Austrade? And I'm asking this question because you'll have people listening to this who are in a process of reinvention. And we've sort of touched on this before, where the skills don't get left at the door, they just get translated into a new context. What is your insight around that? Because it feels to me central to this is your genuine capacity to want to bring people together, which is something that feels like it's very native to you, as opposed to something that is a skill that needs to be learned.
Yeah, I think we're the product of our experiences. And even if at the time, if you're in a role, you're not really clear or sure on what skills you're learning, you are learning new and different skills that will help you in the next role. And I think as I transitioned from law into sport, I had to be able to articulate those transferable skills. Yeah. And to have someone believe and connect the dots on your experiences that they're going to be relevant to the organisation you're going to. So yes, I did an IT degree, and at the time I walked into the AOC, they didn't have much of an IT strategy. They had a bit of a website, but no real strategy around their going. So it happened to be opportune. Yes, right place, right time. Yes, I could lead the project management of the Olympic team, and I had my legal experience, but I could also help in the IT space. So accumulating skills and experiences in different roles at the time might seem irrelevant, but when you look back in a future time, you'll be able to call on them. And the same then when I transitioned from sport into doing the nation branding work, you'd think, how do you go and lead a nation brand when you've not got any particular branding or marketing experience?
Yeah.
But you think about it, I sit in the middle of the Olympic Village. I'm working with 205 countries from around the world. There is no better way to understand how the rest of the world sees you, understand the cultures, understand how Australia is perceived by the rest of the world. I'm wearing a green and gold tracksuit, so I'm naturally incredibly patriotic about this beautiful country. It was really an exercise in bringing stakeholders together, and sport is one of those sectors that it is all about bringing people together with united vision and stakeholder management. So the skills were there, and then it takes convincing of an individual that's willing to open a door of opportunity for me and connect the dots. And I had that when I transitioned from law to sport at the AOC, and then I had it again when at Austrade, the CEO was willing to give me a chance to deliver this important project for our country.
Let's talk about that, Fiona, because the Australian national brand. Now, I remember I made the Australian team for triathlon in 2004, and when I received my kit, I don't think I've had a prouder unboxing experience in my life. Like, it was really
it's delightful, isn't it?
It is absolutely so profound. It is.
I remember the same. It's so
something
special.
Else. Something
Having
else.
Australia on your bum is something special.
It is. Absolutely, it is. And when we talk about the Australian National Brand Project, so just in case people don't know what this is, and I'm sure you give us some more detail, it spanned 17 government departments, 50 plus industries, and your job was to help Australia have an identity. So how did you bring all of these people together to ultimately get to a place where people went, we're good for this?
Yeah. Okay. And throw in there COVID when the rest of the world, when all the world is closed. Yeah. It was a fascinating project. I love those big, bold, ambitious projects when people say you can't. Like when people say it's too big or you can't manage it, like I'm there. Yeah. They're the challenges that are worth taking on.
100%.
So what you articulated about being a proud Australian, I think is what so many of us do feel in Australia. But internationally, we are often irrelevant to the rest of the world. I hate to say it, but we are considered this wonderful, likable. We don't have like a likability, or we don't have a likability problem. We've got a relevancy problem in Australia. Yeah, so people will like us and got a propensity or a favorability to kind of want to see us or buy a product, but we're just not relevant. So important to that project was actually framing up what's the problem we're trying to solve. So let me ask you this question, Phil. Okay, I'm going to say the name of a country and you're going to tell me the top thing that comes to mind, maybe top two things that come to mind. Ready?
Okay, I think I'm ready. Let's do it.
Switzerland.
Snow and currency.
As in money, bankers.
As in money, yep.
Okay, Brazil.
Heat and I've got two things that I'm splitting my mind on. Heat is one of them, and the other one is just outdoor fun and celebration.
Okay. Italy.
Food, man. Food, fashion, and then more food.
Okay. So the things that you've articulated and those that be running around the heads of your listeners are usually one of three things. They relate to the people, the place, or the products.
Right.
Now, if I say Australia, what do you think most people around the world would say?
Island, a long way away, strange accent, Paul Hogan, bridge, crocodiles, maybe Vegemite.
Yeah. And you're pretty accurate. Okay. It's our people.
Yep.
It's the beautiful beaches, the cuddly koalas, the kangaroos, our furry animals and our deadly animals. But it's rarely ever is it a product or a service that we can provide to the world. So it's obviously it's anchored in people and place, but never products. When you spoke about Switzerland, it was about banking. Italy, it was about food. So if you work in global economies where selling stuff to other countries is how GDP grows, Australia's at a disadvantage, particularly when you have something like COVID, when tourism is such a big part of our economy. There's only so many people we can ship around the world.
Yes.
So being anchored in people and place is very limiting for an economy. Having products and services that the rest of the world want and willing to buy, that's where Australia needs to advance. And that was the genesis of the problem we're trying to solve when we look at our reputation as a country internationally. Again, it's not favourability or likability. Every country's got a different problem to solve,
Yes.
And ours in Australia is not that people don't want to come. It's that we're a long way away, pretty irrelevant, and I don't know any product or service that I'd ever want to buy. So that was the work that we kind of went about doing. And it took a while to actually frame the question.
Sure.
And then how we go about leading that, it takes coordination of lots of different sectors. So yes, the tourism sector, the trade sector, the resources sector, the beer industry, the fashion industry, got captains of all of those industries to come together and lead and unite. None of them were paid a cent to do this. These are CEOs of some of Australia's great companies. It's Alan Joyce at Qantas, it's Mike Cannon-Brooks at Atlassian, it was Christine Holgate at Australia Post, breweries, Vogue, really wonderful, passionate leaders about our country. And it is remarkable, Phil, what people will do if they are asked. Yeah?
Yes,
all
correct.
It took
100%.
courage to say, we have this bold, big-ass ambition. Do you think you can help us? And I've become shameless in my career about asking people to do something. Now, whether it's doing something for the Olympic movement or whether it's doing something for your country, generally people are willing to lean in.
That's it.
You need to have an inspiring vision around what it is you're trying to create. But more often than not, these very busy people care about a cause, our country and our country's future, and they're willing to contribute to it. So it was those captains of industry that really guided the project, and they were the ones that we'd send in to prime ministers and ministers as we needed to influence and get clear around what's the narrative we want to tell the world around Australia. How do we want it? So it's kind of like, what do we want to say? How do we want to look? What are the visual cues we want to give to the world? What ultimately are the products and services that we have that are relevant to offer the world? So it was a lot of conversations, Phil. It was a lot of roadshows around Australia, dealing with the states as well as the national. So you have to do it by industry sector and then you have to do it by geography, which is the states play a role. And the marketing budgets of states internationally is sometimes bigger than what we have federally. So it's working within that federal system of states, national politics, state politics, and industry sectors was the matrix of how we kind of broke it up. And then it was around bringing people together and sharing learnings, looking at data and what the research says, how the rest of the world looks at us. And again, that's where that lived experience of having been in an Olympic Village and experiencing how people see Australians. And probably being very deliberate around the bump moments. When the rest of the world bumps into Australia, it's often through sport. Internationally, we're not known for many things, but sport is one of those vehicles by which the rest of the world sees and experiences Australia. They see the informality, they see our humour that we bring on the field of play, but our willingness to be tough and resilient. There's a grittiness to Australians in sport that you never write off. And I think they're the characteristics and attributes that Australians carry in business and the products and services that we sell around the world. We just need to be braggier about what we do, which is not natural to us as Australians. It was a wonderful, fascinating project and a great privilege indeed to be part of doing that. It wasn't without its difficulties. As I said, it was during COVID. We were ready to launch the national brand in February 2020, and it was just as the world was starting to close down. So it was one of those moments where we really had to pivot. We had to pivot and had to change visual components of the brand identity that we've come up with. But that's life, isn't it? You know, the world changes. You've got to be ready to adapt and pivot. And it was one of those ones that we did. And to the leadership's credit, you know, the advisory council, they stuck in. We signed them on for 2 years. It turned out to be 4, but they stuck with it to the end.
I find it fascinating and such a great insight where for people to discover Australia, they bump in generally to us via sport. Like I really, and that combined with the idea of just, we've got to do a better job of selling ourselves. And this is not, you know, it's so countercultural from the tall poppy syndrome that we're so used to sort of bumping up against. But so many people are desperate to hear the story of Australia and of the Australian way of life. The curiosity is huge. It's just that we just don't do a great job of selling it.
That's exactly it. And I think there's 2 points to that. One, I think, is if we anchor it in something that we're known for, and that's where the power of sport is good. We're known for sport. Okay, so how about we talk about our sports science, our sports technology innovations, our sports medicine, because we are leaders in those sectors. So it's a natural kind of extension of something that comes a bit more organic. Because anyone who's ever had to sell anything, it's got to feel organic and natural. And that's where sport is able to cut through and open doors, perhaps that it's a little awkward. And that's the opportunity for us through Brisbane 2032, as with Sydney. It's a chance for us to showcase our country to the world and not only talk about the great sport facilities, but the businesses and the products and services that we have as a country. So the rest of the world, you know, can buy into that, and that then grows our GDP and relevancy in the world.
We've got plenty more sport to talk about. Can I just pause for a minute and just ask, if you were to characterize what you look for in a truly brilliant partnership, what are you looking for in the very early parts of conversations or early discovery to go, I think there could be something here? Are there heuristics that you're forever looking for based on your history that just go, I'm going to pursue something around that, but there's a couple of red flags, or I'm going to walk away from that? How do you compute the opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's no more complex than really walking in the shoes of the other person and saying, what's in it for them? Okay? Yep. And putting what's in it for them almost ahead of what's your needs. That's certainly how I approach it. How can I contribute to their strategic outcomes?
Yep.
How can we do something together that neither of us could do alone? They're the guiding principles that I always come to any partnership arrangement with. And as I start to reflect on the world in which I live, there are partnerships everywhere. You couldn't do what we do without a generosity of spirit, coming to partnerships with a generosity of spirit. And I think that's the way in which I approach it. Now, some strict business-minded people would say people take advantage of that. You need to, you know, with that generosity of spirit, you also have that intuition that you want to play with the people that are aligned in a value set. And that's right. You're right. You walk away from the partnerships that don't have that alignment. But more often than not, there is synergy and there is alignment, and having faith and trust in humanity, that taking that first leap of faith very often imbues it in the other party. So I would say being generous and upfront with partnerships is how I approach it, what I can contribute to them, and naturally then people want to reciprocate.
You know, you've nailed it on so many levels. This term and this idea of contribution when compared to performance is such a critical factor in mindset and execution. When we look at, I often get calls last minute in a negotiation for a large partnership, and it's fallen apart. And I would say 8 out of 10 times it's because the mindset that started with contribution turned to performance, and all of a sudden the generosity of spirit that is embedded inside the spirit of contribution has been thrown out the window because somebody has become very obsessed with what they will get out of a deal. And as soon as that happens, particularly when the outcome is not known, which is kind of ironic because how would you know anyway? I find it just such a powerful term to use whenever people are thinking about doing something together. If that contribution can be brought forward, great things often happen. 99% of the time, it works out well.
And I think that that's the same. It's what I do in high performance sport every day. Yeah. We're all racing for the Olympic gold medal. Okay. There's no denying. We're crystal clear on what the outcome is. How each country goes about doing that is completely different.
Right.
But the outcome is exactly the same. And there's one of them. It's not like we can share it, except high jump maybe, but there is one of them. So wherever there's a finite number of resources and a scarcity of resources, that's where I think you see sometimes poor behavior creep in.
Yes.
Because people come to it from a scarcity mentality. If you can come to it from a generosity perspective, it's almost sometimes the results follow. So I think the system of sport across Australia, high performance sport, was very much, the language had often been around gold medals, and we've shifted that narrative to be more around what we have all signed on to, which is called Win Well 2032. So It's a strategy around how we don't just win, but we actually win well. So how you get there is equally important as when you do it. And when you would imbue and bake that into the whole system of sport across Australia, the results follow. Like the results in Paris 2024 were extraordinary. And it's a product of many, 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 many people's contributions.
Yes.
But it was coming from a mindset of, let's take the foot off the gas of demanding of our athletes to win gold medals. Let's support them in their ambitions, and the results will follow. And I think it's the same often in business. If you focus on a clarity of goal, here's what we're here to do.
Yep.
And a clarity of, here's the tools you have to do it. And then entrust and empower people to get on and do it in a way that is enjoyable for them, then that's a sustainable model.
Correct. That's exactly right. It's funny, even with our 12-year-old football team, who you obviously have a very close connection with, there was a question at the beginning around that I asked them. So what are we here to do?
Yeah.
And
great question to ask 12-year-olds.
there were so many answers until one of the girls that you know very well said to me, well, we're here to win. It's like, I mean, is there another reason that we're here? And that started, and I'm just learning about win well now. From this conversation, I hadn't heard that turn of phrase before. I'm very pleased that that's how we've approached it, just by virtue of the culture we've built. But it is one of those things where winning well proposes a journey, right? Which is not always going to be up, and it's not always going to be down. It will be there as long as you can show up and do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's not mutually exclusive. So we recently hosted a conference of top 12 countries on the summer medal tally, top 5 in winter. And we got together and scrummed around a debrief on what happened, what worked, what didn't work for Paris, and then looking forward to LA and Milano Cortina 2026. And one of the emerging debates was, can you have high performance and well-being at the same time? Yep. So are they mutually exclusive? If you are pushing your athletes to the limit in order to achieve a medal, are you ultimately looking after their well-being? Now, high-performance sport by its very nature is about pushing the extra 1%ers. It is around doing what people have not done before in order to break world records. There is no denying there is pain, there is suffering, there's all those things that are involved. But the well-being and the consent of the athletes to do it in a way that works for them is what we are increasingly understanding is important. So our philosophy in Australia is probably ahead of many other countries in this regard, where it's like, they are not mutually exclusive. They are necessary. If you are aspiring to win, you need to be looking after the well-being of our athletes. And that's what Australia has really got behind the whole system, and is the approach that we're driving in the lead up to Brisbane 2032.
Now, all of these sports, Olympic or non-Olympic, have a very, very long history generally. So we've played them for a long time. There are fans everywhere around the world for different sports. And I imagine that when you're crafting partnerships, whether it be with other Olympic committees or with other countries, if you're trying to work out what is best practice, say, for example, for Brisbane, when we're bringing it back there in 2032, that there is a need to achieve certain outcomes for the endpoint, which will be the end of the Olympics when we bring all the countries to bear in Brisbane. But the sports go on, right? They go on into, the next month. The competition of, high-profile soccer will continue. So will triathlon. So will everything else. How do you think about the longevity of sport beyond the competition? Because I'm sure that people come with very high expectations of how the sport should be when you get to the Olympics, but you'll often see people prepare for the Olympics and then you won't see them for 2 or 3 months after, even though the sport continues. How does that tension work when people are when people all know that the sport will continue, but we've got this massive achievement point to hit when it comes to Olympic Games?
So I think you're talking about the life cycle of an athlete. Yeah. And understanding that there will come a time where you need to transition out of sport and it's time to pass the baton to someone else. It's like in anyone's career, there's a time where you can make a contribution to an organization, when you can be a CEO or when you can be a leader in a certain department, and then you hand the baton to someone else. So it's no different to any other sector, but it's very public, that pinnacle, and it's very deliberate, that pinnacle. And I think that's what makes it probably more difficult for athletes, is because there is such a spotlight on them in such a condensed period of time. We ask so much of them for 4 years and we see them for 4 minutes, during the games. So I think that's where countries and sports systems like the Australian Sports Commission and the Australian Institute of Sport have a responsibility to step back from those accomplishments and say, what are the pathways that we're helping to create for Australian athletes to see the best athletes have their chance to put their best performance at the right time? Yes. And then importantly, what's the support networks that we put around them to ensure that when that time comes, that they have achieved what they want to achieve or not, how do we have them transition into the next chapter into their life? Life doesn't stop after you go to the Olympic Games and win your gold medal or not. That's the start of the next chapter. And I think, again, lived experience has this be a very passionate project for me around ensuring that athletes have study or career planning that they're doing whilst they're an athlete, because you're over one injury away from your athletic career being over. So having a dual career is always important for athletes to prepare for those, bell curve moments, and ensuring that we as systems create space to allow that to happen. So if you are a coach, that you allow them to skip a session if they have got an important exam, or when you're touring overseas, that the university allows you to do the exam when you come back. It requires goodwill on a lot of people to make that happen. And it's hard. Like I did a double degree whilst I was, training and racing with the Australian triathlon. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but the benefits of having that duality to who you are and how you go about what you do is also really important. I've also seen it be really important for athletes that don't achieve what they want to at Olympic Games. For every athlete that wins the Olympic medal, there's 10 that don't. And to see that they have something else going on in their life is equally important. Sport's so important for teaching you the attributes of resiliency and motivation, determination, and all those great things. And they're the attributes that, should follow when you pursue a career after sport. But you need to build that on your way through sport. So I don't know if I answered that question.
No, you did it very well. I mean, the interesting thing that we we do see in sport is that it is that public, and we don't take into account that there is a life that lives behind
Yeah.
those athletes. And I think I hope that we've become better at acknowledging that, because we have seen some absolute catastrophic failures of what happens when athletes have not been supported through that process. And we've
Yeah.
also seen fantastic upside when they have. And so I think I hope we're trending towards the latter.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where actually media plays, a big part in telling those stories. So with content forms like Netflix, you can see a lot more of the behind the scenes stories, the sprint series where they traverse and follow the lives of these athletes leading up to a major sporting event. And it helps build that empathy and understanding of what they go through. And then importantly, the attributes that those athletes need to carry to be successful on the world stage. But it's a beautiful thing to be part of.
Yeah, I've never seen our daughters so glued to the TV than when they watched the Simone Biles Netflix series. They had so many questions afterwards around I didn't realize this, or just how terrible it must have been, or how good this must have felt, or whatever the case was. So I do hope we see a lot more docuseries in sport to give us that insight, because it's a shame if we miss it, because they are all humans doing extraordinary things.
Yeah, and every athlete has a story to tell, I think. And that's what's really powerful about the Paralympic movement, is the stories behind those athletes even getting to the start line are extraordinary and admirable. Like I remember watching Rising Phoenix, I think off the back of Rio, and like I will never feel sorry for myself a day in my life after watching that. It's extraordinary record of those lives of those athletes.
When we were doing research ahead of this conversation, we noticed you used the term curveballs, as we all do when we're thinking about, scenario planning. And that is something that whenever people feel, very paralyzed about what a decision should be, I often find that one of the best ways to display or to move away from that point of fear is to run scenarios. We do it in the military every minute of every waking exercise that we're working on, because we're there to train to be excellent when the moment is required. And I'm always surprised how it does occur in sport, but it does not happen very often outside of those two arenas. So, the context for this question related to the London Olympics, but, when you think about contingency planning, what is your mental model, or the mental model that you get your teams to think about, so that it's something that's commonplace, not something that only happens retrospectively?
It's a great question for businesses, because I think as our human nature is to be optimistic, at least mine is, and to think about the best things that can happen. So it takes immense courage as a leader to lean into the possibilities of what could go pear-shaped.
Yes.
It's easier in the context of something like military or even the Olympic Games. You're going in to execute a plan and then you're coming out. And there are foreseeable things that can happen. Yes, an athlete could test positive. An athlete could get involved in an accident. There could be a bomb that goes off. There's a whole range of scenarios that history will inform us happen at the Games. And I guarantee you some of those things will. And I guarantee you, no how much scenario planning that you do, there will be situations that you're presented with that you never could have scenarioed out. We were very deliberate. You're obviously going into a different country, which has different cultures. So we would curate scenarios based on the cultural nuances that we would have to navigate, and bring in cultural experts from that country to help frame them. We'd bring in security people that would talk about the security risks of those countries. Yes. So again, it's collaborating with different people to have different perspectives. We would often take like a military perspective and say, how do they do it in those kind of workforce environments? Some things like uniform distribution, whether you're distributing an army uniform or an Olympic team uniform in a foreign country, you've got to go in, you've got to set it up, you've got to get it on someone's back, and then you've got to get out. There's things to be learned from people in other sectors. And I think the curiosity of involving people outside of your bubble in those scenario planning is really important, because they see things that you just are blind to because you're so deep in it each day. So when I'm looking at those curveballs, I often involve someone who is outside of my organization or outside of my sector to look at it through a new lens. And in an increasingly changing world, we all need to do that, no matter what your sector, no matter what your business.
That's it.
The tides will come and the waves will come crashing. It's a question of how prepared you are. And for my team, I often would not talk to it as it being, a desktop exercise. This is arming you with the skills that in the moment when you're going to need to react, this will help you stay calm and help you take the first few steps that need to be taken in a moment of crisis. And we ask so much of our people, in our organisation, particularly in Olympic Games. It's like I would work 20 hours a day for 6 weeks. And your capacity to think in those moments is diminished.
Yes.
So having a good plan it just makes common sense to help react in those situations. And I think businesses don't have natural time and date stamps. The good thing about the Olympic movement is you've got Olympic Games. You're crystal clear. Every 4 years.
It's coming. That's right.
Every 4 years, it's coming whether you're ready or not.
Yeah.
Businesses, I think, need to create some of those false deadlines so that you are deliberate around cycles.
Yes.
Whether it's annually or a bit, longer range. So creating those time and date stamps where you review how the world has changed, what you do, and how you ought to inform your thinking relative to how the world's changed. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder as well, sometimes scenarios are good. You can sort of go, well, actually, if then we do this, it's a very logical kind of step. But in some cases, partnerships need to come to an end as a consequence of a relationship, and it's often not very publicly spoken about because there could be reputation risk, there could be the desire not to burn bridges because you might end up working with people again. But it happens, and it happens more often than people would like. It's a bit like when people, step out of a different role, or they feel as though they've got to make a big change in their life. Because we think so much about ourselves, we forget that this is happening every day to countless numbers of people. It's very normal. It's a very normal sort of life cycle. I'm wondering how you think about winding up partnerships if it's not obvious they're going to be able to make it all the way through to the intended outcome. How do you think about the approach to winding up a partnership?
Again, it's being honest and transparent around the reasons. So I guess if you came to it in the first place with that generosity of spirit, and that generosity is not being reciprocated, then it's not for me to feel bad about that. It just didn't work.
Yes.
I think there's the emotional baggage that we bring to that situation of it being a failure. And I think stepping away from the word of it being a failure and leaning into its energy that can be better spent on a more profitable partnership. It's not transactional, but it is how it is. In life, I mean, my philosophy is pretty simple. I want to play with the people that want to play with me. And if a partnership is that someone doesn't want to play with me, that's fine. I'll go play with someone else.
Yep.
So let's be honest around, do you want to play with me or not? And if at some point you thought that you did and now you don't, that's cool. I'll move on and find someone else I want to play with. Like, at a big picture. And there's money involved and there's contracts and there's legal, I know there's all of that. But I've also found you toss and turn and stress about breaking or walking away from partnership, but the void is so quickly filled. And whether it's a partnership within an organization, like an employer and employee, it's a partnership. You employ me, I promise to give you services and you give me, money and opportunities to do cool things in this job. It's a partnership. At some stage, there's someone else who can do a better job, or you have an opportunity to do a better job somewhere else. Like, it's the same in partnerships. And I think in sport, we have natural time and date stamps around, often 4-year cycles with Olympic Games, winter or summer. So it does create this natural opportunity to review partnerships and review how things have done based on a scorecard Olympic medals or otherwise. So in our industry, it's probably a little easier to navigate because you have got those moments where you pause and reflect on a performance. And I think businesses need to be upfront around the timeframes within which you're going to review and their natural opportunities to jump off a cliff or change things as you need to. But I think as I've got further in my career, I've kind of got less awkward about walking away from things and just go, okay, it didn't work. Like, no fear of failure. It's like, that's a learning.
I love that. And it's interesting because I think life is just too short for mediocre partnerships.
Yeah, totally. It's like, move on. Like, they'll move on and you'll move on.
Fiona, you've been massively generous in this conversation. I have 2 more questions for you before we wind up. So thank you so much. And I do encourage, if you are contemplating a move into sports administration or supporting sport in any kind of way, please look into the show notes for the links that we're sharing there around Fiona's history and what she's achieving right now and what she is looking to help bring to life with the Olympic movement, because it is something else. It is really a sight to behold. So Fiona, with all the conversation we've had around partnerships, what do you think people are missing about partnerships in order to grow and make progress? Because we often will hear people say, look, it's just easier to go it alone, right? We've got all the stuff we need. We can just keep doing it. But you and I think would agree that we're better together in trying to achieve an outcome. So what are people missing if they're not in a conversation with you and I?
It just seems such a dumb way to do it. Like, it's just not like, you have limited time, you have limited resources and limited capacity. And I'm a firm believer in doing what you do best. Now, I can't be good at everything.
Yep.
So I would rather hand over and partner with someone else that is really good at their bit than try to slog it alone. So what are people not doing? I think people are not willing to relinquish control or autonomy or letting go of like a little bit of ambiguity around the result. It takes courage and it takes a leap of faith. So I think it's an absence of faith in others, and which is why partnering people that are so aligned with your value sets and who you are. So when there's discretionary choices that need to be made along the way, you're going to kind of tend to make similar choices.
Yes.
So I would say it's that trust and leaning into allowing others to do something better than you could do yourself and being okay with that.
Yeah, I love that. All right, I have a 5-question rapid fire to close us out today. You good for that?
Good for that.
All right, here it is. So question number 1, complete this sentence. Partnership is?
Doing more together than you could ever do alone.
Question 2, what content are you loving right now? And it can be anything.
I'm into my books. I like long form, so I'm reading Jacinta Ardern at the moment around, different kind of leadership, which is this challenge of how do you be strong and still have kindness in the work that you do, which is a leadership style that I deeply resonate with. I'm not into politics at all, but I'm finding that really interesting. And of course, I love my Netflix, any doco about, behind stories, biographies of athletes. I'm there. Netflix binging and long form when I have, 10 minutes to myself.
I was going to say more than 5 minutes to yourself.
Yeah.
Excellent. What's the worst piece of advice you've received and why?
Oh. Interestingly, when I was looking at, when I left the Olympic movement, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go work for another country or change industry. So either change countries or change sectors. And I spoke to some recruiters about, maybe going overseas, and they're like, you're too old, too late in your career. And I'm like, oh.
I'm sorry, what?
I know. And I thought that was really bad advice because it did sit with me even when I made the transition now. And it's like, you are never too old to do anything, 1. But 2, the experiences you gain from moving internationally at any age is just so rich and rewarding. And there's so much I've learned about myself and about Australia and about the world in which we operate by lived experience living in another country in the middle of Europe. So I think that's pretty bad advice, yeah.
That's truly awful advice. Okay, I'll leave recruiters to one side because we could have a whole nother conversation about that. All right, question number 4. When you spot a partnership opportunity, what's the first thing you do to turn that conversation into action?
I do something for them. I'm generous for them. I find something professionally, personally, or aligned in purpose that I can do for them. So it's sending them an article that they're interested, knowing that their kids play soccer. I can send them a soccer ball or invite them to an event, something that genuinely would make their day better. Like that's what we're in the world to do, is to, we've got the opportunity to play and make the world a better place, and I want to be part of doing that. So being generous in giving to others is probably the first step I take, with no expectation of return, like genuinely.
Well played. No, that is spot on. And last question, what's one thing you are especially grateful for right now?
One. Can I have one ABC?
You bet. Give me as many as you got.
Grateful for. I am deeply grateful for being Australian. I have to say that, as someone who's offshore. We are so blessed in the country that we grew up in and all the richness that we have. I'm grateful to have the family that I have around me. That is, parents that gave me every opportunity I had, and my beautiful son, who I'm able to experience Europe through the eyes of a 10-year-old. It's so much fun. And the third thing would be, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do the work that I truly love. Yeah. So I love the sector of sport. I love being part of making Olympic dreams come true for athletes, which is the deeply rewarding work that I do running an institute. Yeah. So kind of upstream the problem where I used to take athletes to an Olympic Games. You're part of the most important part of their athletic life. Now I'm in their daily training environment, helping them prepare for that, and working, with other countries around the world, aligned in making the world a better place through sport. So I know how deeply privileged I am to have the opportunity to work in a sector that I love, and having stepped away from it, I chose it for all the right reasons, and I know how blessed I am to do work that I really love. And I look forward to continuing to do that as we welcome the world to Brisbane.
It is something else. Fiona, thank you for being so generous with all of this insight and just showing what true international partnership means, because I think the world needs more of it right now, and I think you are setting a real standard for that. So thank you for all of your time today.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure, Phil.
Before you go, I have a quick question for you. Do you worry that you're wasting time, money, and credibility with the wrong partnerships? It's exhausting to pretend everything's fine while secretly worrying that you've made the wrong call. You see others thriving with the right connections, and you're stuck wondering if you're missing out on opportunities that could really elevate your business. Well, the good news is that ends today, because you can download my free partner calculator that instantly assesses if a partner is an ideal fit for your business. It'll give you the clarity and the confidence and the edge you've been looking for to secure high-value partnerships that not only finally unlock business growth, but also help you reclaim your time. The link is in the show notes. And I'm really glad you're here. I'm Coach Phil Hay Sinclair. I'll see you in the next episode.